Welcome to the CEO Story, brought to you by Chao He, founder of Together CFO, where every week we're interviewing the top CEOs in various industries, sharing their journey and extracting the top things that made them successful. Good morning, guys. We've got a fantastic episode today. We got Chao He, one of the co-founders of Swenson He, which is one of the most renowned and best development companies in all of LA. Chao, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you doing this morning?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you just give us a little bit of background about Swenson He and what you guys do, just to add some context to the conversation?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Chao. My partner and I, Nick Swenson, we actually met more than a dozen years ago at this point when we were fresh college undergrads at MIT. And so, based on our sort of technical experience, we joined forces a couple of years after graduation, having learned kind of some of the ins and outs of both the tech side and also the client services side of software development. And so for us, where we are today, where we've come since our founding, is we're always striving to provide both that level of client service that is best in class. Now, obviously, the work product, the deliverable, is held to its own technical standards. But for us, what we really place a huge amount of emphasis on, in addition to those technical deliverables, is that level of client service, making sure that we're creating long-term partnerships with clients, that we're not just sort of in and out, one and done. And then on this sort of we're still pretty small, but we've grown very rapidly, and we've had to always sort of pick and choose what kind of projects that we work on. And so we tend to gravitate as a sort of mission statement towards projects that do have a large impact on everyday life, that people will actually use, interact with, that we're not just sort of stuck in the back office doing whatever inventory management and accounting. And, while all that stuff is important and definitely needs to be done, because we have the opportunity to pick our own projects, we tend to gravitate towards ones that, we think will make a difference and people will actually enjoy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you guys, you mentioned a little bit there, but you've been rated as one of the fastest top 5,000 growing companies in LA by, I think it was Inc. Top 5,000 recently, right? And you've
Yes.
got a whole host of other accolades. So firstly, congratulations for that. But what I really want to kind of learn more about is how you went from inception to growing such a fast growing company and getting all of these national recognition awards and kind of ultimately adding a lot of value back. So you touched on it there where you knew your co-founder from MIT and kind of being these smart guys out of university. How did you then translate that into a fully operational business that's actually generating a lot of revenue and making a big impact, like you said?
Yeah. So we get asked this a lot. I would actually say that the first thing to mention here, we're only 6 years into this. In the grand scheme of things, we consider ourselves still young and scrappy. And so, reflecting on the past 6 years to us, it sort of does feel at times like, we're still in the process. So a lot of the kind of takeaways and stuff, they're still being proven. Now, yeah, I mean, I certainly think that if I were to try to encapsulate what we've learned in the last 6 years, a lot of it comes down to, first of all, Nick and I, we're not only are we business partners, we were fraternity brothers in college. I was actually out on the East Coast last week as he was getting engaged. We're in each other's lives as best friends as well. And I think having a business partner that's not necessarily that you have to be, a husband and wife or best friends or whatever. You just have to have a very, very good working relationship with them. And, at times that comes down to fully trusting the other person with a part of your business that, if in a perfect world you could do everything yourself, you would do everything yourself, right? But the way that we've been able to grow and scale has a lot to do with trusting each other, divvying up work such that we're not constantly bottlenecking. And, in certain circumstances, we still become bottlenecks, but at the very least, we have two people that are trying to remove bottlenecks as opposed to just one. And I think for the two of us, being able to essentially trust each other to do a certain piece of the business has certainly made the work streams parallel. But we also we're very similar in a lot of regards in how we think about problems, and so it does actually become relatively easy to be able to divide up work, because if we already know, and based on our experience, based on having known each other for a number of years before we started the business, um, that we were able to think about problems the same and sort of come out with solutions that were nearly identical to the way we would have done it ourselves. I think that's given us a lot of confidence in each other's abilities. um, Now, I think building on that, one of the other things that we have always held as a sort of central tenet to our partnership, and also just our business in general, it even manifests in the way that we present our client deliverables, is that and this kind of is sort of a cliche uh, phrase, but to never be satisfied and never sort of be just set in your path in the way that you're doing it, and always sort of questioning every part of your every decision that you've made. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always spinning your wheels, but it means that you're always open to new ways of approaching things and stuff. And so we've certainly pivoted a lot. Our business today looks nothing like it did six years ago, or even 2 years ago. But over the years, we have done a lot of been able to essentially, through Nick and I's partnership, we've discovered that there's certain ideas that we come up with that may not have been the same as what they were in the past. And always, we can talk about this a little bit more, but all the pivots and changes that we've made I think that's been really impactful.
I think that's really important because same with my business, 4 years ago when we started, it's very different to what it is now. When do you know when to pivot and when to kind of stick with whatever you're doing?
Oh, that's that's a tough question. I don't know if there's a true barometer necessarily for that. A lot of it comes down to um, I mean, you're always looking backwards and you're always looking forwards. I think that's part of the reason why Nick and I tend to actually work together really well. We complement each other in a sense that Nick is very analytical. He will try to build financial models, and literally he'll try to spreadsheet our entire business, whether it's forecasting or retro looking at profit margins and resource allocations and stuff. He's very numbers driven. And I think when you do become numbers driven, obviously you can glean huge amounts of data and insights that you may not even think of when you're looking at raw numbers, whether it means, hey, like we're paying these resources this amount of money, and if we were to swap them out for a different kind of resource that may introduce a new a different need, but also provide you some benefit in terms of margin, or the clients are happier so they churn less. That's the sort of insight that you can really gather using the actual data. But what I tend to gravitate towards thinking about things a little bit more high level. And I think when you remove yourself from the data a little bit, it sometimes is actually easier to then think about, okay, what's coming down the road, right? So for example, earlier this year, obviously this year, everyone's been talking about how is COVID going to impact the, just business in general. And I actually read an article this morning about how people were predicting this earlier this spring or winter that the summer with the higher temperatures would help alleviate some of the COVID spreading, and clearly that hasn't happened, right? We have multiple states in the United States that are just setting new records every day, and so when you have sort of this climate, there's always the sense that you do need to be almost always thinking about how you're changing and pivoting, that nothing is set in stone. And I think that it's a sort of a response to environmental factors. So I guess the way I'd answer your original question of how do you know when, is you don't really, but you take your best guess and you go from there, right? Sometimes it feels like you're just staying the course and sticking it out and making sure, trying to get one more sale to prove your model. Maybe sometimes that's the way to go. And if that feels like what's right to you, if you're, really believe in your plan, then do that. But also sometimes, it may seem like everything's going well and, you've got clients coming in, you've got revenue, But something just feels like the music is about to stop. And it's just like there's something out there that no one may have connected the dot yet between what you're doing and what someone else is saying in the media or some other environmental situation that's going on, or market situation. And if that just feels to you like if you just have this sort of tingly sensation in your spine that things are about to change, then you got to get ahead of that. You can't wait until things have already blown over.
So it's kind of being data driven, having a pulse on things, and just kind of being aware and alert as much as you possibly can is kind of the takeaways I took from that.
Yeah, I would agree. That's
so. Okay, as we get into kind of your business, how it's evolved and how it's grown, how have you dealt with the sales volatility, the ups and downs, especially as you guys are mainly project based? How's that kind of affected the way you review things and kind of grow your business?
Yeah, of course. So we to answer this question, I think it's probably worth mentioning like why sales volatility. I mean, I think it's pretty clear to understand that sales volatility is a problem. In my business, though, it kind of gets taken to a whole new level. And the reason I say that is because as a sort of, let's call it a small/medium-sized development shop, each project represents a fairly significant chunk of your operations effort, of your revenue. It's not like, let's say you have a consumer goods manufacturer will manufacture somewhere between 100 and 200 SKUs, and let's say that like 5 of those SKUs aren't selling very well, right? Well, yeah, 5 of them not selling as well as the other 95%. Still means that you have a relatively predictable revenue stream. For us, the numbers they're sort of a different level of magnitude. When you have let's say one project all of a sudden comes to an abrupt end because either the client ran out of money or whether someone on their side pulled the plug, or just whatever else the case may be, and that's certainly happened to us before in the past. It does mean that a fairly large chunk of your business is now just it's been kind of adjusted, corrected away. And for us, that's historically been some of our most stressful and stressful and just ground changing periods of time when, you've had to then scramble to say, okay, how are we going to deal with, do we have enough cash reserves built up to be able to, keep operations afloat when those projects go away? Can we fast track any deals in the pipeline that are close to closing? Can we offer them any discounts to get them across the finish line so we can make ends meet? At times like that, I think each time it happened, and it happened multiple times over the course of, I would actually point to there were several like historical periods of time when you could we can reference them literally like spring of 18, fall of 16, like there just were times when big large kind of chunks of business would disappear, and clearly there's also times when like many new projects start all at once, and then you sort of have a different problem, right, where you're kind of having to figure out how to scale up very, very quickly, because you certainly you want these clients in the door. You don't want to have to send them somewhere else, especially because each project then if there's a possibility of becoming a long-term sort of relationship with them, that it's obviously great for the business. I think for us, what we've tried to do and shift and when I sort of mentioned the kind of even in the last 2 years, what we've tried to do to learn from that 16 and the 18 the so-called crises, is to be able to build our business in a way that's a whole lot more flexible. So we've done a huge top to bottom sort of revamp of fixed costs, of things that you just in downturns you just are now saddled with all these costs. It's a mixture of redesigning our staff in a way that we've now, and it's not that we actually haven't laid anyone off ever. But a lot of it is about, when someone decides to take a new position, we examine their position and say, okay, in your position, this position, can it be sort of broken up into like more components, or can different components be combined in a way that we can sort of see some synergies? And the end result is that, we now have a smaller, leaner staff in terms of fixed costs. We call them fixed costs. So
Yeah.
that's your operations, sales, and stuff.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially at an early stage where you want to be agile and flexible without that big monthly burden creeping
Yeah.
up and getting a huge burn rate as like a technology company would have. Speaking of
Mhm.
which, when we talk about kind of technology and the shift and pivot, it makes me feel like I need to ask this question in terms of the shifted market demands from your customers from back when you started to now. How has that kind of changed being in such a fast moving industry?
Yeah, I think the way that we are, the way that I think the way we've seen changes the most profound changes are, um, it's originally when we started, it was very common for, kind of like us, some people with technical backgrounds to then just put up a website, say we do X, Y, and Z. We can do the development, and then just sort of do some search SEO, get your whatever a couple of ads out there on your social, and then people would just start coming to you for the technical development part of a project. And whether that means that, it's someone that has an app idea that they want to get an app built, which is, for us, that was actually how we got started. That seemed to have been the status quo more in the very beginning. Just kind of, going to them for the technology, getting the tech built, getting that handed back over so that now you just, everything else to do with running the business or running the product that the new sort of new product for an existing company was managed on the client side. What we've started to find is that as things have, and this kind of like, with our growth story, as we've kind of grown, and maybe this is just because we're reaching farther up market, we're finding that clients are looking for a whole little bit more white glove service. I don't like to use that term because, white glove just to me feels a little antiquated, and it kind of seems like, I don't know, just old fashioned, which I guess is good in some circumstances. But what I'm using it to define here is that it's not just technical development. That's really only one piece of a larger puzzle, where you first have to, even in your discovery call, you're questioning, trying to get a really good understanding of what is the business challenge that the business is facing, or what is the market opportunity that this potential new product is trying to address. Trying to get to the bottom of it even comes down to things like unit economics, proving that this is a viable business, that there's a market for this, that customers will actually use this. And I think getting to the bottom of all these questions, almost like a VC would do to, any sort of like pitch that they would get, being able to truly understand if this is a viable product, then allows us to, start with not a technical implementation phase, but a product strategy phase, diving into user journeys, doing market research about whether that's focus groups, whether that's figuring out how we're actually going to build a product that users will actually use, and taking it from there then to the design phase, beautiful UIs, building the technical product, testing it, market testing it, having tight feedback loops where you test iterations and get feedback on it. So I think for us, then we've kind of seen that this process means it's resonated with clients a little bit more, in the sense that, now they feel like they have a partner that is providing them a whole suite of services, as opposed to just sort of cherry picking the engineering and just handing it off the engineering. And then getting back, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's very key in the world that we live in right now, where there's just more and more demands on vendors to over deliver, right? In terms of, like you said white glove service, but I understand what you mean in terms of giving more than expected, I think is the way I'm going to phrase it, so that you're always getting that 5-star review, and it kind of keeps perpetuating the highest standard of what you're delivering. You touched on this earlier a little bit about dependencies on bottlenecks between you and your co-founder. What are some of the tangible things that you guys do to kind of get around that? And what are some of the actionable items that we can give the listeners to really help them in their own businesses get over similar things?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that probably has helped us the most, if I were just off the top of my head, the the important thing to sometimes is to just recognize that there are certain things. Okay, so sorry, before I even jump into that, the clear answer here, right, is to try and set up processes and procedures such that you can pass off a certain amount of what you do to someone else. I mean, that's the basic theory, right? Now, in practice, what ends up happening is that I think what we've identified is that as a founder, you wear so many hats. We use this phrase a lot. We wear a lot of hats, right? We wear sales hats, we wear strategy hats, operations, finance, human resources. I mean, like, just, as a founder, that's, you just do everything, right? So the problem is when you think about certain roles and you're trying to build out your organization in a way that, new roles you'll be able to hire people for roles that'll take over a certain portion of what you do, to free you up to then do new things, right? That's the basic premise. The problem is that when you are doing that, you tend to, without even recognizing it as a founder, what you tend to do is you tend to project your own characteristics on these roles or on these potential candidates. And the issue with that, now, clearly, the company still has to have your DNA, and the way that things are done. If it's just done totally differently, it's not going to work. As the CEO or as the founder, you're going to clash with your employees. You're going to micromanage, and that goes down a sort of bad rabbit hole. But at the same time, what you don't want to do is just project exactly how you're doing things onto this other person, or be able to say that you're capable of doing X, Y, and Z, and this person, the reasonable for whatever compensation, for whatever qualifications they have, should only be reasonably expected to do X. And so then being like projecting your own image, the exact way you do things, the exact speed at which you do things onto this, this poor recruit, it's a recipe for disaster, because then you lose trust really fast. They feel like they're not being appreciated, and it just its efficiency goes down and it spirals. And so I think one of the things that we've learned is that we kind of have to, at the moment of dissociation, which is when you actually are handing over responsibilities, to essentially cut yourself off from thinking about you doing that role, right? And that is the sort of, that's an important lesson that we've learned, is because, once you've set everything up, once you've kind of carved out a chunk for someone to do, you can no longer think of it like you're doing that, and someone else is just replacing you in what you were doing. So I think that's probably one, I guess, one takeaway that's been really helpful for us to be able to alleviate some of this this sort of founder dependency.
No, it's really, really important to be able to have solid systems and processes. And we talk about this a lot, but I think one of the frameworks that I really like is EOS, and that has a really strong basis of making sure you have a strong framework, systems and processes in place, but not overly do it. So exactly what you just mentioned there. So as we go to wrap up, I like to end with a question, just to get your perspective on things. And if you had to allocate between three different factors your success, how would you do that between drive, skill, and luck?
Ooh, drive, skill, and luck. I'll be the first to say that skill is the least important thing. For me, yeah, I don't I don't see myself as very skillful in a lot of areas. I'm always trying to improve that, but yeah, definitely the lowest. Between drive and skill, I would actually, sorry, between drive and luck,
Yeah.
I would actually place a relatively large emphasis on luck. I think we got pretty lucky at times. Our founding story starts with a referral through someone random that happened to know someone on a board of a small company, and then they just reached out to us. So we actually had a contract before we even started the company. We've also gotten pretty lucky over the years with just a pretty booming economy, let's put it. Although who knows, like this year's been kind of volatile, but we've kind of grown to the point where we can handle some of that volatility. Yeah, so I would say luck is right up there with drive. Drive is, I don't get me wrong, drive is like by far and away, like if you were to just off the top of my head, if I were to say anything, it would be drive. I mean, we use the term drive, or like we Nick and I have talked about it like grit. We actually look for the grit. If someone is, they're at the office 7:30 on a Friday night and everyone's out at a bar, and they're just looking at it going like, if I were to just spend 15 or 20 more minutes and this would be perfect, and then I can submit it and it would be, done. I'm not going to wait until Monday morning. That's that quality, that like urge to just get things right and to be able to just grind your teeth through whatever pain or whatever, missed opportunities and stuff. I would say that we value that in our employees a lot. We certainly recognize in ourselves that's been one of the reasons we've been able to get so far. So I would definitely put drive at the very top, but luck is not that far behind.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. We appreciate you sharing with us and helping all the people that are tuning in to listen. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Let's stay in touch.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks.